Hey guys, I'm going to be doing another interview with Marta. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell some people about what you do and some of your experience?
Uh, Hello. My name is Marta, and I am a fresh graduate from Limerick School of Art and Design, and I studied animation for 4 years.
I think one of
Um, yeah, go
to
on, go
continue.
on.
Yeah, I think like one of the reasons that I wanted to interview is because I think it'd be good for a lot of people to kind of see how the kind of art and animation industry is kind of dealing with COVID, how things have changed in animation, how more digital tools are used. I thought it'd be good to kind of see the business behind things, because I know that you're kind of slowly building like a side business just with your art
Mm,
online. So it's kind of crazy to see that, like, maybe 10 or 20 years ago that artists wouldn't be able to do that, where they had like the physically in person, had to sell their art and stuff like that, through different stores, markets.
yeah.
Um, like the old school like e-commerce websites at the time, which were more expensive, like we didn't have the things like Etsy, so I thought it'd be cool to kind of talk about that stuff. So
I don't have
I
to
get
drag canvases to like farmers markets to sell my art
Yeah,
there.
it's like if we had like COVID maybe like 20 years ago, it probably would have like almost destroyed that industry. So
Of
I guess let's
course.
start off with like a question like, uh what is your favorite animation movie?
Oh, that's a really tricky question because there's so many different types of animation.
Or if there's like a
uh,
studio that's kind of like your favorite, or
uh, my favorite studio has to be Leica Studio currently because they specify in stop motion animation, which is what I essentially want to do with when I get into a studio or open my own studio. So yeah, they're my favorite because they do stop motion animation. It's really nice and it's kind of like goal what I want. It's kind of like nice to look at them and be like, yeah, that's where I want to be.
and like stop motion animation, I guess, is like one of the first forms where kind of digital media was used, because that's like mostly done with like short clips of like moving the different figures or your clay and stuff, is it? Or do you want to go into more detail on like the process of that?
Well, the process of submotion animation is, in my opinion, is the hardest animation type of animation, uh, because you have to be able to make the puppets first of all. Obviously, you can hire people, but for people like me who do everything, I have to know the engineering part, like building sets, using tools like actually like hammer, nails, and the kind of like the practical kind of skills. And it is hard. It is like done digitally as well. Like you have to know how to edit, green screen, lighting. It's really hard to do, but it's really fun. Yeah, like if without Etsy, I would not know what how to sell my stuff. You know what I mean? It would have been way more harder to get my product out there. But because Etsy is so popular, it's really easy and handy to have this wonderful option. Here I am promoting Etsy. That's what it is. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and like I was thinking about, like I said, I wanted to have my own website eventually, but the more I think about it, if like Etsy does all of the paperwork for you, it does all of the taxes, it does all the emails, sending out the emails. All you have to do is click dispatch, and that's it. You don't have to worry about sending out the emails to people to confirm that their thing was sent. And they
Yeah,
don't they take like obviously they take a percentage of your earnings, but it's not that like high. You know what I mean?
yeah,
So
like the
you're still able to get a bit of money, knowing that your taxes are paid, knowing that everything is paperwork is all underlined and everything is fine.
yeah, like the cost is like so low on it and stuff like that. It just makes things like easily more accessible, and there's probably a lot more people who probably wouldn't have gone in that business and be able to make a career around like Etsy and the kind of digital art landscape and stuff like that are now doing it. But do you have any like goals in the future that you want to kind of do with your art online? And also maybe you were talking about like creating the studio. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, like I always dreamt to be able to live off of my art, if that makes sense. I always dreamt to sell my own prints and stickers and badges, eventually maybe even shirts. Like I would love to be able to do that and live off of that, basically support
Yeah.
myself from this little shop. That's my ultimate goal right now. But at the same time, I would love to get a job in a studio, animation studio. But
And
because of COVID,
that's
it
nearly
has
impossible.
it's impossible because you know, animation studios are very social, group work. It's a very communication, person to person communication, which is hard to get through email. You know, it's really hard to get across stuff like that. So plus like Ireland is small, so there's only very few animation studios, which is very hard to get a job because they're all looking for 5 years experience, and I'm like
I think one benefit there could be with kind of COVID is like more companies are getting used to having remote workers, so people who are working from home or anywhere around the world, and they're getting kind of use of that kind of infrastructure of kind of running a business. So potentially in the future we could see like more animation studios who are having people who don't even live in the same country. Have you like noticed any of that? Have you like seen any companies that you follow, or like do you think that the production is cut, or do you think there's a lot of people working from home?
Whenever I'm applying for animation jobs, they say work from remote, like you can work from home, which is amazing, but it's kind of like a disadvantage for some people because a lot of animation studios provide the technology.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of people who don't have the technology at home.
So yeah, there's like some people who are at a disadvantage, you know, especially coming out of college, who don't have the cost for like the expensive equipment like that.
Exactly. I just got myself upgrade for my tablet, but that's just because like my sister helped me out with that. Without her, I wouldn't be able to get it, you know, because it's so expensive.
Yeah.
So you know, it's a great option to work from home because you don't have to, you know, risk yourself, you know, traveling and getting the virus. But I can see it being a disadvantage for a lot of people who don't have technology at home.
I think another thing that you were mentioning, that sometimes with studios you need 5 years experience, and you might have like a unique art style, a lot of selling points and a lot of talent, and then maybe like still to this day, but obviously years ago it was more prevalent, that when they kind of look at a CV or a portfolio, they're not really getting to see like your kind of full potential. But with kind of social media and stuff like that, as you're kind of building up a following and stuff like that, and people like your art style, that potentially in the future as you grow, that you could have like an art studio who would like look at your like social media and be like, oh, she's a big following, a lot of people like this art style. And do you think that like based on social media alone that like you could like bring in the attention of studios or to your art style, or like what is your opinion on that?
That's a really good question because it could be a double-edged sword because some people can, you know, you're looking at someone's Instagram, let's say, and they have beautiful art style and whatnot, and you hire them based off of their art style, and then they turn out to be the worst worker ever.
I think I've seen like horror stories on YouTube about that, but from the other end of things, where a big company gets in contact with them and it just goes completely wrong.
Yeah, like it's like when it comes to working in an animation studio and stuff, that's what my tutors have told me always. It's not really about your skills, it's about your personality and your willingness to learn. And as an artist, we're always growing, so the enthusiasm to show that we're willing to work and that we're not, you know, egoistic and we pretend that we know everything. It's always good to be, even if you don't know anything, try and say, I don't know this, but can you teach me? That's what they're looking for, essentially. So
it's like you could be the best storyteller in the world, the best artist in the world, but then when you're in a big studio, you have to work in a team, and if you can't work with anybody,
exactly,
that, you know,
if you're a narcissist and you're egoistic and you think you're the best, they don't want you. They don't want people like that. You know what I mean?
I think in like digital marketing is kind of similar with clients. Like you have to kind of have thick skin and stuff like that, and be able to kind of
Of
work with
course.
people. And sometimes when like people stress you out, or you kind of like stress them out, you just have to be good with like kind of working with people. So yeah, like your personality, because sometimes you'll put. I think of like the way I kind of see it are just kind of friends of mine who are in kind of the animation studio, that yeah, when someone does kind of have an ego, then they kind of rub off wrong against people in the workplace, and then the kind of the morale of the business is kind of dropped and stuff like that. And
Of
you know
course.
it's a team, not about like an individual, even though
There's
an
no I
individual.
in
Yeah,
team.
pretty much.
There's me in team.
So
But yeah, no, it's you have to have some sort. You obviously have to know your worth, and you need to know that you're good. But
yeah,
you need to be humble,
yeah,
which is it
I
could
agree
be
with that.
kind of hard for some people. You know what I mean? But I think for me, I would be able to work in any studio because I'm always willing to work, and I'm always putting 100% in my work. So.
Yeah, I think it's always kind of good to be transparent like that. So, like, what sort of digital tool? Because I know you really like 2D and you like to hand draw some of your stuff. But like, what is like your process? Like, do you use like much digital tools in a lot of your work, or do you want to
Um,
talk about some of the tools you use?
I'm okay. So before I went to college, I had no digital tools whatsoever. I didn't have a drawing tablet. I never drew in Photoshop. I
Yeah,
was always pen and paper, all that. So when I came to college, it was kind of like, oh, I had to work twice as hard because everyone else had digital work, digital skills and stuff. So I had to work twice as hard just to be somewhere near their level. Um, so right now I'm doing a bit of mix. So
but
I do watercolors, markers, and then I switch to digital and draw in Photoshop. And I do some animation, and then I go back to markers again. I switch between two things.
see, when it comes to like your type of your kind of process, because I'm a big comic book fan, so I'm like I kind of follow a lot of like the comic book artists, but kind of
Mm-hmm.
like a lot of the old school guys, or some of the guys who want to keep the kind of older kind of style that comic books were made. What they'll do is they'll get like the big, is it like A2 page out, and they'll kind of draw the comic book, and then they'll scan it through, and then they'll go into the computer and kind of do it. That's kind of like your kind of style, isn't it? That you'll draw it first, then scan it in. But I think
Um,
that there's like a unique kind of style to that.
yeah, like I don't do that all the time. I scan. Obviously, I have to scan in drawings because my phone is too bad to take photos in. So
Yeah,
whenever I do something traditionally, I do scan it in. Currently, I'm doing the October challenge where every day I draw a different creature from. This year I made a list, so I'm doing Slavic mythology, but I do the thing traditionally, and then I scan it in through my scanner. And then I edited one in Photoshop because I wanted to add some mist to it. But yeah, I do mixed media as well, but mainly it's kind of like
yeah.
traditional.
So I think one major thing that I definitely have to talk about, it's something that's really very important, I think, for like businesses, for marketing, when it comes to animation. It's storytelling. That
Oh yeah,
when I kind of
definitely.
like market a business, or I'm kind of like working on an ad, there has to be a story there, because people don't care unless there's a story. It has to be interesting. So in
Yeah.
your kind of line of work, having done a degree in animation, like storytelling must have been huge. Like, do you want to
Yeah,
talk
you
more
can.
about that, like how important
Yeah,
storytelling is in your work?
yeah, of course. You can have the best skills in animation. You can draw beautifully, but if you're not able to come up with a story, it doesn't matter because you can only look at a nice, pretty animation for a minute. So, like, I was when with Arthur, for example,
That's what I
I
want you to talk
started
about.
I started working on the story for Arthur in December, and I was working for concept and story and the script, character development, character turnarounds, how they look like, how they will sound like, what are their personalities until March.
Yeah,
So I worked for December, January, February, March. That's, quite a long time to develop a story. And the story changed. I have a full notebook of notes. Why was Arthur there? How old is he? Why? What era was this? Animation set. How did he get here? Did he have parents? Like all of those questions, I have the answers to. That's because I did my research. So
And it definitely kind of comes across that, you know, that you did your research and that when you kind of look at him, you can tell like he's a certain years old, he has a certain personality, the way he moves. It's almost kind of like, you know, in acting where like they'll go and say if it's like a biopic, they'll go and like find someone connected to the person the movie was about and then try to like you know, how old were they, what were they thinking then, you know. It's almost like you're almost not only an animator but almost like an actor in a way, or actually more so like a director.
yeah, my
Would you agree with that?
Oh, of course, definitely. Because with Arthur, I was directing, I was editing, I was, you know, making the executive decisions. Where's the lighting? How is the camera? You know, when is the camera turning? I was editing, you know, because that's what you do with a final year project. Everything was made by me, and all of the decisions was made by me, except voice acting.
Yeah.
That was my friend. But I had to write this. I had to write the dialogue for him. I had to edit the dialogue. I had to tell him how I wanted him to sound, like what emotions I wanted him to portray through that. So it is like my tutor always said that animators are shy actors.
Yeah.
Because even when I animate, I will first record myself do the action or do the expression myself, and then I will apply it to the character. Because
awesome.
even with Arthur, I was recording myself lifting up my head, turning my head. You know, even when Anderson was sitting down, we could see the back of his head sitting down in the chair. I recorded myself to know, because you can't animate blindly. I can't just like, you know, animate with not knowing how the body moves. So I had to know exactly how the body was moving while I was animating. So there's a lot of skills you need to be aware of a lot of things when animating.
Yeah, there's a lot of skills that you have, you know, to kind of get into kind of the animation industry. But it's good to kind of talk to you about, you know, the art side of it, and then, you know, when you're kind of like being like a freelancer, setting up your own business, and then working in a studio, and the kind of it's not only that, like we're even kind of talking about the personality traits you have. Like for you, what sort of influences do you have for art, or was there any other like animations, any movies, TV shows, like anything in general, any like, you know, historical person, like what were your influences for creating that animation?
For Arthur in specific, or
well, Arthur in Pacific.
For Arthur, I was looking at a lot of Tim Burton movies, because he does essentially do like horror movies.
Yeah.
But I was also looking at a lot of old Soviet animations, because they're really weird and they are very dark and they're so weird. I recommend anyone that is into stuff like that watch old Soviet animations, because they're always very weird, and there's always like this. They do stop motion, loads of stop motion as well, and there's always this weirdness in it. So I was looking at a lot of horror movies, like a lot of short horror movies that were, you know, on YouTube and stuff. I had a list of them. They're somewhere, but I've done the research, and I was also like, you know, if I saw an interesting angle in a movie, camera angle, I would cut it and I would put it all together in one video, you know, clips of different angles that I found interesting, which I was like, yeah, I might use that in Arthur, may or may not use it in some other things.
I think, you know what it kind of reminded me of, I guess I could see some like aspects of like older movies, you know, definitely kind of like maybe like the Universal or like the Hammer horror era. Definitely could see some Tim Burton vibes for it. But you remember like when we were kind of like kids in the 90s or early 2000s, there was a show, I think it was like Ghastly Kids. It used to be on like Nickelodeon, and there used to be like this kind of older guy that used to introduce the stories, and it was animated. I think it could have been stop motion as well, but it was definitely claymation maybe, or it was 2D.
See, I can't really relate to that, because we grew up both in two different.
Yeah, I'll have to kind of show you later, because like I definitely got like some kind of like vibes that, you know, definitely kind of reminded me. But I thought it was a great story, and I guess I'll kind of finish off with kind of one last question, because I do need to go into like the personal development side of things. I know a lot of time when it comes to like artists and stuff like that, you know, to the person who's viewing it, they're like, that's absolutely amazing, that's kind of talented. But I know that like a lot of artists kind of like struggle to be like, oh my god, it's not good enough, or or like their work is never done. You know, you'll kind of see like people like you know, George Lucas, he'll go back and he'll re-edit it, like the Star Wars movies a million times. So you'll have artists who will like, he'll go back and, you know, they'll redo a version of their art before, you know, they're, so how do you kind of deal with that, you know, when you do like an art piece, to be like, okay, like that is done, I'm just gonna leave it, you know, and being able to deal with I'm not sure if you deal with, I know people kind of have like insecurity where it's like never good enough, because I think that's like a trait.
Yeah, that's a really well common feeling for myself personally. It's all about, it's a matter of confidence. Like, I hated my art, and it took me 4 years to develop an art style, which I'm still, you know, creating. But I edited Arthur 10 times before I submitted it fully, because I was not happy. There was like, I could change that. I still, if I watch, because I haven't seen it in a while, if I watch Arthur now, I could probably edit it again and change some things now. It's like, that's what critical eye, that's what it's called. But as an artist, I had to find myself and find a balance between like constant criticism and praising myself. So there was a lot of times where I'm sitting here and I'm like, oh, this is shit. This is bad drawing, stop. Like, no. But then I have to I have to like kind of stop myself and be like, no, this is a good piece of art. People like this. People keep telling you your art is nice. Stop being so hard on yourself.
And when you were kind of doing art, or did you send it on to like some other classmates or kind of peers, you know, for constructive feedback, or?
Oh, of course, yeah. Constantly, when we were making our final year project, we had we used Slack, the app, so we were constantly sending our progress there, and I was the only one that did stop motion, so I honestly I didn't get much like constant like criticism. I got, oh, that's nice. I think two people kept on giving me like ideas, but people were not really sure how to respond to this because they didn't know what to say, you know?
Yeah.
But the shooters were really good at, you know, being honest and tell you what they really think. So that was really handy.
I think no matter what industry you are, once you kind of have a product, it's always kind of good to take on, like, not haters, but obviously just constructive feedback, and then you can kind of sit, you know, and kind of have like a critical think and just kind of see where you're going to go about it. But obviously, like, don't let people, you know, kind of persuade you too much, because you don't want to,
of course, you need to have
creative process.
Yeah, you need to have thick skin, and you need to be confident in your own vision.
But I guess I'm going to leave you with one more question, and if you want to tell people where they can find you. So the last question is, for anyone who's like an aspiring animator, anyone who wants to be able to kind of sell their art online, would you have any tips for both, based off, like, you know, your experience, for someone who's kind of, you know, interested in that sort of thing?
For artists that want to start their own Etsy, do your research. Find a good, either if you want to produce your own prints, for example, do your research on your printers. You need to, in order to earn money, you need to invest money. So don't be like cheap. Put money to good product and it will pay off. Also, don't be afraid to ask questions. Any artist, I'm sure, that has their own Etsy will be able to answer any questions. Try and get comfortable with the idea of social media and promoting. And don't feel bad when you keep promoting your shop on Instagram, because I feel bad every time I plug it in. But, you know, you kind of have to get used to that. And plan everything. Have everything written down in front of you. Make a plan before you know, don't jump into it. Have a plan.
I think there's some like great tips there. And then for aspiring animators, maybe they're in college, would you have any kind of tips of, like, you know, how to improve, you know, different kind of, you know, animations to check out, like anything that you found useful, you know, when you were maybe your first or second year, that maybe can pass on some of that knowledge?
Don't be afraid to experiment, and don't be afraid to make mistakes, because people who don't make mistakes don't learn anything. Make mistakes and learn from them. God, I sound so wise.
Yeah.
But like, observe things, look at things, look at the way people walk, look at the way people talk, their gestures. I also suggest to have folders on your computer or phone, even clips of videos of people walking, how birds fly, how environment. Just be aware of your environment, how it works. This will help you loads when you're for composition, when you're animating. It will help tremendously. Also know your body anatomy.
Well, it was an absolute pleasure, and some of the things that we talked about today I think will be definitely useful for a lot of people, and it was definitely interesting for me to kind of have a chat and to be able to kind of see things from your perspective, you know, being in kind of like the arts and animation industry. So where can people find you, Marta?
They can find me on Instagram. Marta Chen Art is on Instagram. And I have links there to my Behance, which is my animation portfolio. I have links to Arthur. I have links to my Etsy, and everything is there.
Well, thank you very much, and I appreciate you for being on the kind of interview podcast today. And yeah, I'm gonna post some links to like some of your stuff and whatever with this episode, so if anyone's kind of interested, you know, they can find her on Instagram and be able to kind of check out some of those links. But thank you guys, and thank you, Marta.